this history video of today, we will try to see how to understand chronology. Understanding chronology is very important in history, because if you don't understand chronology, remembering history becomes very difficult. Added to this is an aspect of confusion. So to avoid confusion and to remember history, it is very essential that we have to know chronology. So what is chronology? Chronology means arranging events, arranging aspects based on time period. We all know that in history, most of the events have to be remembered based on time period. Most of you know many names in history. Everybody knows something about history. Names, events, dates, battles, wars, etc. So everybody knows this events, dates, battles, war, etc. But the problem is in trying to arrange them in proper sequentiation. So without this proper arrangement or without this proper sequentiation, it is highly confusing and it is very difficult to remember as well as very difficult to recollect. So if you have to remember the data in history, if you have to make it very easy to recollect, it is essential that we have to learn how to arrange this data which you already know based on some sequentiation. Let us try to understand how these historians have done it. Say for example, if an event has happened in history, we have a lot of events which have happened in history. Initially, historians, when they try to arrange these events, let us presume that they started at one place and they arranged the data from that one place until today. That one place maybe let us consider 1 year, the first year. After the first year, let us say that is the first year, now the period is 2017. So all these data which you know, let us presume, can be arranged from the first year to 2070. Certain data can be arranged, for example, Raja, some data, Raja, Akbar, Aurangzeb, British. Like these events, like these aspects can be arranged in the data. So if you have to have a chronology, it is essential that we have to have a place from where we have to start. So this is the place where we have started. So what historians they have done is imaginary place they have kept in history, because if you have to keep a place which is starting, and if you come to know a data which has happened before that starting, then we cannot push back the period where we have started. For example, if I know only these data which are existing here, starting from the first year to 2070, and if I come to know a new data which has come to the light because of latest historical analysis, now I cannot shift my date back and rearrange all the periods associated with Akbar, Aurangzeb, Raja, British, etc. So what the historians have done, the historians have imagined a place to be one, and based on that, on one side they had extended the data which is positive, and another side backwards they have pushed it. So that one is characterized by an event which is called birth of Christ. So they fixed a place which is called the birth of Christ. From the birth of Christ, they know for certainty from which date Christ was born. On that date, events happened after the birth of Christ, they have been put into some category. Events happened before the Christ, they have pushed behind in that way. So we'll try to understand this better in the next slide. See, one place they have said which is called Christ, birth of Christ. Then from the birth of Christ, I have extended this date till today, which is 2017 year. So which indicates that from the birth of Christ 2017 years have passed so far, and before the birth of Christ we can push this data in the other direction also. So 2017 means birth of Christ. Then let us presume that this is 500 years. Now this is 1000, this is 1500, this will be 2000. So in one direction it is existing. Another direction also, if an event has happened 50 years before the birth of Christ, now we can say 50, now we can say 500, now we can say 1000, now we can say 1500. Up to what extent we can extend, that we do not know, because new evidences can be found. So far we think that around 400 BC is the place from the time in history where we get evidences. Maybe in future we will try to uncover a lot of archaeological facts and evidences which may push the history backwards. So I am telling that in both ways this period can swing. In order to avoid the confusion in this swing, what we have done is, at one place where we have kept as the birth of Christ and 500 years after the birth of Christ, 500 years before the birth of Christ. So 500 is constant, before or after. In order to fix this, they said before Christ, they say BC. So if I have to mention an event which has happened 500 years before the Christ, I may call it 500 BC. And if I have to mention an event after 500 years of the birth of the Christ, I may call it not after BC, I will call it AD. AD means Anno Domini. That means, simply for your understanding, you may think that Anno Domini means after the Christ. So event after the birth of the Christ were arranged as AD. Events before the birth of the Christ were arranged as BC. BC being before Christ. So that means in history, whenever you read any event, whenever you read any personality, please try to see the year in which it is given. Say for example, I can say Buddha. Buddha means approximately, I will say 500 BC. Then I can say Harsha. Everybody knows this name, Harshavardhana. So Harshavardhana, I can say approximately 600 AD. It indicates that Buddha was born 500 years, Buddha was living 500 years before the Christ, and Harsha had reigned in India 600 years after the Christ. So this BC and AD we have to understand very clearly. And all our dates we have to arrange in the mind based on this BC and AD. And for information, let me draw this map again and we will try to know the data. One place I said is the birth of Christ. Now 500 years after the Christ. Now 1000 years after the Christ. 1500 years after the Christ. 2000 years after the Christ. This is simply AD in one side. The other side I would say is BC. That means 500 years, 1000 BC, 1500, 2000. It extends in the other direction also. It extends in the other direction. Now we have to know this very clearly, and there is one more factor which you have to know. See, the difference between 500 BC to 500 AD is not 0, it is 1000 years. And the difference between 1000 BC to 1000 AD is 2000 years. And the difference between 2000 BC to 2000 AD is 4000 years. This is very relevant because when I say Indus Valley civilization, the people of Indus Valley lived around 2000 BC. The people of Indus Valley civilization lived around 2000 BC. It indicates that the people had lived 4000 years before, because 2000 BC means 2000 years before the Christ. Now 2000 years had passed since the birth of Christ. So approximately 4000 years old is the Indus Valley civilization. That we have to know. Yet one more point which you have to know is that this is Christ. One more point which you have to know is, let me draw this again. 500 BC, 1000 BC, 1500, 1900, etc. BC. In one side this is BC, another side this is AD. Now logically I will try to say one thing. A person can be born in 1900 AD, and if a person is born in 1900 AD, there is a possibility that the person may die in 1950 AD. This possibility is highly logical. Similarly, we cannot say that a person is born in 1900 BC and he can die in 1950 BC. This is not possible. Why this is not possible? Because in AD 1900 comes first, 1900, then 1950 will come after 1900 in AD. But in BC, first 1950 would come, 1950, then only 1900 would come. So to say that a person is born in 1900 AD and can die in 1950 is logical, possible. But to say that a person is born in 1900 BC and dies in 1950 BC is illogical, absurd. This you have to clearly understand. Secondly, one more event we have to understand is, once after analyzing this chart, this you have to have in the mind. So all the data which you already have in your mind, everybody may be having some facts, some figures in the mind. Everybody know some people in history. So based on this chart now which is available, you can categorize these people, you can arrange them. This is called sequential arrangement of data in history. So when you arrange them in this chart, and if you give a vision, if you see a sight of this data which you arranged, then it is going to give a clear picture to you. Arranging the data in this chart means properly placing the person in the correct perspective. If you place a data in history, an event in history, a personality in history, in this chart in proper sequentiation, it is very easy for you to recover and recollect the data. Let us say, for example, we have this data and randomly we can generate some names. For example, Ashoka, we all know this name Ashoka, everybody knows. Then we have a name which is called Chandragupta. Then everybody knows Aurangzeb. We know a British name, for example, Dalhousie. Then most of the people know something about Ghazni. Then we know somebody who is called Harshavardhana. So all people know these names, but the problem is that without the proper sequentiation, it is very difficult for us to understand who came after whom, who came before whom, and who is a contemporary of whom. Let us try to understand. And if you know that Harsha to be 600 AD, Ashoka to be 250 BC, Dalhousie to be 1850, then we have Aurangzeb who is around 1700 AD, this is AD, and Chandragupta, I am speaking about the Gupta ruler, who is around 330 AD, Ghazni we have around 1000 AD. Now we can arrange all these events in this chart. Not only that, once we have arranged, so Ashoka is first, Ashoka, then we have, after Ashoka we have somebody who is called Harshavardhana 600, we can say. Then Aurangzeb 1700, we will put it in the last. Then we have Chandragupta 330. So Chandragupta should be before Harsha, after Ashoka. So Chandragupta, we can arrange him in this. Ghazni is 1000, so we can, Ghazni comes after Harsha and before Aurangzeb. So like this we can arrange this data. So first thing what we have to do before learning history is to understand this chronology. Second thing what we have to do, first understanding chronology. Second, what you have to do is try to place the data which you have already with you. First find the data which you have already in the mind, and for the data you find the year of each and everything which you have. Thirdly, you arrange the data based on the year in the chronology which you have, means which you already planned. So arranging the data, and after arranging the data, fourth, again study the chronology. Now you will have a better understanding of the history which you have already known. So already you know some history. That history, if you properly arrange in chronology, you will have a clear understanding. That is the first exercise. Second exercise is that whenever you read anything new, first what we have to do is, any new data which you accumulate, again take this data and put there in the chronology, which you already planned, that you place there in the chronology. So new data can also be properly arranged. Old data had already been arranged in your memory. So this will enable you to clearly understand what is what. So I am going to conclude this slide. It will be sufficient, and I am going to take furthermore classes based on chronology of ancient India, chronology of medieval India, chronology of modern India. Thank you.